أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء وخاتم المرسلين سيدنا ونبينا بالقاسم محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين واللعنة الدائمة الباقية على أعدائهم من الآن إلى قيام يوم الدين. Brothers and sisters in Iman, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. We have been looking at this beautiful story from the family of the Prophet as an example of the people who are al-abrar, at the highest level of righteousness, those who are selfless in whatever they do for the people. And basically that was part of the conclusion of the preamble where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Suratu l-Insan begins by talking about the creation of the human being, and then he talks about the guidance that he has provided, inna hadayna as-sabil imma shakiran wa imma kafura, that either the person would be grateful by accepting the divine guidance or they will be ungrateful by ignoring it. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about the consequences. And when he talks about the consequences of those who will be grateful and follow the divine guidance, he uses the term al-abrar, and this is where we come to the example of the Ahlul Bayt. From ayat number 7 to 22 is the story of the 3 days fast of the Ahlul Bayt. And so, coming to that, let me just, connect with the event yesterday, that we reached to the point where we talked about the first day of fasting, which the Ahlul Bayt did as fulfillment of the nazar that they had done, that if Hassan and Hussein gain, full and speedy recovery, they will fast for 3 days. On the first day, Bibi Fatima Zahra salawatullah alayha took the 1/3 of the yarn, spun that, and then she took the 1/3 from the wheat and grinded it into flour to make bread into it. And I had made a point yesterday that, this is where we come to realize that marriage life is not based on only legal values of Islam. That will not work ever. You have to combine what is known as fiqh with akhlaq. And this is where we come to the issue of, from a legal perspective, the husband is responsible to provide. But when it comes to the issue of, moral values, this is where we see the concept of mawadda and rahmah comes in. The love and compassion, the mercy towards one another should be there. And this is where flexibility comes in fulfilling the duties or the expectation that, the couple have from one another. In this example, we saw that Ahlul Bayt were going through a difficult time. And the work is actually in this case is being done by Fatima Zahra. But one more point I wanted to just, show the flexibility. Means when we talk about responsibilities, the lines are not cast on the stone. Once during the early days of their marriage, Ali and Fatima went to Rasulullah and they asked, how do we divide our responsibilities as far as household work is concerned, household chores. And this is where Rasulullah said, well, Ali, whatever is to be done outside the home, you are responsible. Whatever is to be done inside, Fatima, you are responsible. So he drew the line in a way. But it didn't mean that line was solid. There can be, flexibility depending on the time. Especially if you look at the example where once the Prophet came to visit his daughter, and this is where he saw that, those days you couldn't buy atta and flour just ready-made. You had to buy wheat and then grind it at home to make it into flour for bread. And he saw that Ali and Fatima both were actually helping one another in grinding the wheat. Rasulullah didn't say, Ali, this is not your job. This is from inside. Or he didn't, Zubillah, scold his daughter and say, what are you doing? This is your responsibility, not Ali's. Instead of that, actually Rasulullah asked them, who among you has been doing this before than the other, earlier than the other? And Rasulullah said, well, Fatima was doing this. I joined her to help her. And so Rasulullah says to Fatima, you stand up. And Rasulullah himself took her place. Salawat padna ek bar aur. So in the story of Suratu Dahr, when we see that, Amir al-Mu'minin went to this Jewish neighbor, the businessman, who deals with wool and things like that, and got the yarn with the understanding that Fatima will do this spinning of that, and he asks in advance the wheat for the food. So it's not something, we shouldn't say this is, well, how does this work in Islam? No. The mawadda and rahmah is there, depending on the circumstances. The husband and wife both have to help one another. And so the first day they fasted, and Bibi Fatima prepared, 5 loaves or, roti, bread, put them on the sufra, on the tablecloth, and they were all there together. Unlike the modern lifestyle that people have. Parents eat at one time, children eat at another time. Even in children, they just eat whenever they feel like it. Now we see even in this Western lifestyle that family dinner is kind of, being forgotten. And this is where we have to realize that, this saying, it is not part of our religious teaching, but when they say a family that eats together, stays together, has some meaning and value to it. There was a interesting survey I read a few years ago, the report about it, where they were looking at the National Merit Scholarship Corporation of US and the students that they were giving the scholarships to them. They actually profiled national level, merit scholars who got the scholarship for the last 20 years from that time when the survey was done. And they saw that, what was the common thing among them? They all had good marks and everything. The common thing that they saw among them, that all of them, at least 3 or more nights a week, they will have dinner with their family. Whether they had an impact or not, I don't know, but this was an important, point to think about. That it's important in this busy lifestyle that we have to maintain that concept. And this, I would consider it to be part of Silatul Rahim. Even to sit down in this busy, lifestyle, to have dinner together itself would be considered a part of, Silatul Rahim. Now, this is where we come to the next ayat. وَيُطْعِمُونَ الطَّعَامَ عَلَى حُبِّهِ مِسْكِينًا وَيَتِيمًا وَأَسِيرًا. And I'll come to the ayat later on. Right at the time of iftar, this is the first day of the story. Right at the time of iftar, they sat down. Somebody knocks at the door. Assalamu alaikum ya ahl bayti Muhammad. Miskinun min masakin al-muslimin at'imuni. At'amukum Allah min mawa'id al-jannah. That salam to you or the family of the Ahl Bayt of the Prophet. I am a miskin, a poor fellow from the poor of the Muslims. Feed me, may Allah feed you with the blessings of Jannah. And this is where we see that, Amir al-Mu'minin decided to give away his bread. Following that example, Fatima Zahra, following her example, Fizza, and the amazing thing, 2 young sons. They also gave up their bread. And this is where I would just change that statement. A family that eats together even gives charity together. I think it's important in this part of the world that when parents are involved in charity, they should get their children also part of their activities so that they learn this good, issue of being charitable. And this is where, and we'll come to this later on, but sometimes people might ask this question. There was one miskin. Why give away all 5 breads? And why even allow the young children to do that? Remember, we are talking about Ahlul Bayt. The expectation that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has from them is different from the expectation that He has from ordinary Muslims. Those who have that higher status, their imtihan and ibtila is also of a higher level. And this is something we should never forget when it comes to the Ahlul Bayt. Now, and this is where, the ayat which came down, and I would like to only focus the rest of the time on one word from it. وَيُطْعِمُونَ الطَّعَامِ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes that the people who fulfill their pledge and their nadhr, and those with this fear of the day, whose the day of Qiyamah, where the fear of that would be overwhelming. And then Allah says after وَيُوفُونَ, they are the one who fulfill the vows. And the second description is وَيُطْعِمُونَ الطَّعَامِ. That these are the people who feed the food ala hubbihi, in spite of its desire for it. They were hungry. They had fasted for the whole day. And therefore the hub and the desire, for that food was there. And this is where, sometimes people say, well, it means here, ala hubbihi means ala hubbillah. Well, the next sentence actually explains that. There is no need for this. This is actually talking about, according to Allama Tabatabai, he says, no, this actually means that although they loved what they had in front of them, but when somebody else asked for it, they sacrificed and gave it away. Charities are of different levels. Sometimes, we have extra or no more of our use, we give it away. Salvation Army, mashallah. This is what happens mostly, And I'm not saying it's wrong, but that's one level, a lower level of giving charity. Then you have, maybe something which has not been used. Maybe you have bought for yourself, but you have extras. So you are saying, okay, you'll share one with somebody else who needs. Then this higher level, وَيُؤْثِرُونَ عَلَى أَنفُسِهِمْ. And they actually sacrifice. Although they need it, but they still give it away for someone else. And that is the highest level, and that is not just that's not charity, that's actually the level of ithar and sacrifice. And so on that day, they ended up doing the iftar with only, salt and water. And so inshallah we'll go to the second day, but let me just go on the word that I would like to focus on. وَيُطْعِمُونَ الطَّعَامَ عَلَى حُبِّهِ مِسْكِينًا. The miskin came, the poor fellow came at the door. Let us, tonight look at this issue of miskin. There are 2 words that Quran and Hadith has used frequently. One is miskin and one is faqir. Both actually have the same meaning. There is only a difference in degrees and intensity of the poverty. When we talk about faqir, is a poor person. And this is where a person is poor, but he does not go around begging in the street or from the people. There would be some fuqara, some faqir and poor people who are going through difficulty, but they do not even disclose and display this to anyone. You know, as we call it in Urdu, we say Safed Poshi. They maintain their dignity. They don't feel like going out and asking for help. So that's where we talk about the faqir. But miskin is somebody, you know, who openly, you know, is in a very dire situation, and that this is a faqir now who goes and begs for help. And therefore, you know, for the people who beg on the streets, we call them miskin. In most parts of the Muslim world, this term is very, very common. Now, it's interesting to see how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has talked about miskin and masakin in the Quran. Just to emphasize on this point, there is a general statement that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has, where He says that, you know, وَفِي أَمْوَالِهِمْ حَقٌّ لِلسَّائِلِ وَالْمَحْرُومِ. One of the ayat of Quran says that in the wealth of the people, there is a haqq and a right for those who are sa'il, those who beg, and those who are mahroom. Mahroom means those who have been deprived for whatever reason. And so this is something we have to realize, and Quran has very strongly, like many other religions which talk about charity, has talked about helping the masakin. There are actually 23 ayat. I try to classify them in different ways. The early ayat that I have here actually are the ayat where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is emphasizing the issue of charity. And this is only picking on the ayat where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has used the term masakin or miskin. I'm not talking about, you know, different words in infaq or sadaqat that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about. For example, right in the beginning where He talks about وَآتَ الْمَالَ عَلَى حُبِّهِ ذَوِي الْقُرْبَى وَالْيَتَامَ وَالْمَسَاكِينَ. You know, emphasizing that, you know, what is righteousness? لَيْسَ الْبِرِّ. This is how the ayat actually begins. It's a long ayat, one ayat. But Allah says that righteousness is not turning right and left, facing the qibla or other directions. And then He talks about the fundamental beliefs and i'tiqadat, and talks about some of the moral and ethical values. And this is where He says, and that one of the things is the righteous people are those who give the wealth for the sake of ala hubbihi. Now you can say here it refers to the love for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They give it to those who are related to them, who are needy, but they are part of the extended family circle. And yatama wal masakin, and the list goes on. Masakin is plural of miskin, the person who is so poor that he's going out begging from others. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala again says, قُلْ مَا أَنفَقْتُم مِّنْ خَيْرٍ لِلْوَالِدَيْنِ وَالْيَتَامَ وَالْمَسَاكِينَ. That, you know, there is a question before this ayat that, O Rasul, they ask you, what should we give in infaq and charity? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, whatever good you give. Then He gives a list of those who are recipients. The first would be the parents. If they are in need, they will be the first among the deserving people. And then the orphans, wal masakin, and the list goes on. In the next ayat from Surah Nisa, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about the time when the issue of mirath is being discussed or being distributed. At that time, especially keeping in mind the issue of thuluth, 1/3 that you have been given the right to think about it and to give to those relatives who are not going to inherit you, and the orphans and the wal masakin, and the poor one, and to provide from that. Again in Surah Nisa, we have what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about this issue of being kind, which means much more than just giving money or helping them financially. Where it says, وَبِالْوَالِدَيْنِ إِحْسَانًا, to be kind to the parents, وَبِذِي الْقُرْبَى, and those who are related to us, وَالْيَتَامَ وَالْمَسَاكِينَ. Then the next ayat from Surah Anfal is where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about the issue of khums. They're also talking about the qualities of those who are deserving from the descendants of the Prophet. He uses the term, wal masakin is one of it. In Surah Tawbah, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about sadaqat, and this is zakat in general, where this is actually even the usage of the wajib zakat also comes in it under sadaqat. He has a long list of about 8 to 9 categories of people who should be helped from zakat and sadaqat. And the first is lil-fuqara wal-masakin. And then other causes come in. And I'll come to this ayat later on. Then this is Surah An-Nur, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلَا يَعْتَلِ أُولُو الْفَضْلِ مِنْكُمْ وَالسَّعَةِ أَنْ يُؤْتُوا أُولِي الْقُرْبَى وَالْمَسَاكِينَ. And the ayat goes on, that those who have been blessed from among you with the grace from Allah and vastness in wealth, they should not make a commitment of not giving to those who are related to you and to the masakin. They should share their wealth with others. Then the ayat from surah number 59, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about مَا أَفَاءَ اللَّهُ عَلَى رَسُولِهِ. Again, this is something similar to the issue of khums, and it comes under the same category, where the recipients are from Al Rasul, and there also Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses the term masakim as one of the criteria for those who would be deserving. And continuing with that list, we come to 2 more ayat on the issue of charity. وَآتَ ذَا الْقُرْبَ حَقَّهُ وَالْمِسْكِينَ وَابْنَ السَّبِيلِ. What Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is commanding to give the right which is due to the relative and to the miskin and the stranded traveler. Very similar wordings in another ayat, فَآتِ ذَا الْقُرْبَ حَقَّهُ وَالْمِسْكِينَ وَابْنَ السَّبِيلِ. And this is where we see that in all these ayat, in the last slide and the 2 ones here, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is emphasizing of, sharing what Allah has given to us with those who are in the category of miskin, those who are begging for help. Then there is another way by which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala emphasizes this point, and that is in form of kafara. There are certain actions that people do which violates the commands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and then there is a remedy they can deal with that problem. And one of them is actually feeding the masakin. Very relevant to the example of Ahlul Bayt at the time. That was charity, not kafara, but this is the example of kafara. For example, those who find it difficult, not impossible, but difficult to fast. So those who are in that age where they would still be able to fast, but it will be very, very difficult for them. They don't have the taqat that much to go through it. When the exemption is given to them, it is given with a condition. وَعَلَى الَّذِينَ يُطِيقُونَهُ فِدْيَةُ طَعَامِ مِسْكِينٍ. They have to pay fidya, not kafara. Kafara is a penalty for not doing it without a good excuse. And fidya basically is feeding a miskin. Then, we talked about the issue of nazar and the ahkam earlier when we talked about the nazar. What does yufuna bin nazar? What does the nazar mean? And if you are not able to fulfill the nazar after Allah has fulfilled your wish, then there are some issues there, kafara. And this comes for nazar as well as for those who do shari'i qasam. And what is the kafara there? فَكَفَّارَتُهُ إِطْعَامُ عَشْرَةَ مَسَاكِينَ مِنْ أَوْسَطِ مَا تُطْعِمُونَ أَهْلِيكُمْ أَوْ كِسْوَتُهُمْ. The kafara would be to feed 10 poor people from the average food that you feed your own family. And if you can't do that, then the other option would be to provide clothing for 10 poor people. In Surah Ma'idah, again, this is actually relevant to one of the ahkam of ihram in Hajj. If a person violates one of the rulings of ihram, one of the kafara there is أو كفارة طعام مساكين. And so this is where we see an example where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has used this remedy of taking care of the violations of His ahkam, one way of helping the fuqara and the masakeen. The next ayat, ayat number 58, Surah 58, ayat number 4, deals with an issue of zihar. This is not that much common, and I don't want to go into details. Basically, it was a common custom among the Arabs. The sanctity of mother is so great that a person is not allowed to in any way in a physically compare the wife to the mother. This is where the status of the mother comes in. And so zihar means the back, pushed. And so in any way, doing zihar in that way, this was common among Arabs at that time, and it was forbidden. And the kafara basically was to go through some steps before, but if they cannot do that, فَمَنْ لَمْ يَسْتَطِعْ الصِّيَامِ, fasting for a number of days, فَإِطْعَامُ سِتِّينَ مِسْكِينًا, then they had to feed 60 poor people. The next ayat again is a different category. It's not talking about charity, it's not talking about kafara or remedy for violation of some of the penalty for the violation of the laws of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is actually condemnation of the evil people. And this is where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, one of their characteristics of this evil people was that لا يحب على طعام المسكين. These are the people, the ayat before says, these are the people who didn't believe in God at all. And one of the things that they used to do, immediately after not believing in God, Allah says, they did not encourage themselves or others to feed the beggars and the poor. So he takes the issue of kufr and then immediately, not being concerned for, encouraging themselves or others for feeding on the just second after the issue of kufr. So this is the part of condemnation. And another verse where some people will go into Jahannam and the Malaika will ask them, what happened to you? What were you doing that you end up in the fire of Jahannam? One of the things they will explain, وَلَمْ نَكُ نُطْعِمُ الْمِسْكِينَ. We were not among those who were feeding the miskin. Means it is an issue that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, strongly is presenting as one causes for a group to go into Jahannam. Again, same theme where he talks about the people who were of evil kind. He says, وَلَا تحاضون على طعام المسكين, very similar to the ayat before that we discussed, that they did not encourage, themselves and others to feed the poor people. And the last ayat, and that actually Suratu al-Ma'un. Suratu al-Ma'un is a very interesting surah. And if you read that, you will see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, says, begins by saying, do you know the people who do not believe in Qiyamah? And then, there he talks about it, and immediately he says, وَلَا يَحُضُّ طَعَامِ الْمِسْكِينِ. One of the qualities of those who do not believe in the Quran, in the Qiyamah, are those who do not, encourage themselves and others to feed the poor. Of course, it talks about their prayers also. When they pray, they are very lazy in it. So this is not talking about the kufr of Qiyamah as a kafir. It means a person who really doesn't see, is not 100% sure of Qiyamah. They believe in the Qiyamah, but when it comes to the actions do not reflect that belief in the Qiyamah. And one of the actions is that they have no concern for feeding the poor people. And this is where I just wanted to, put this ayat together. The emphasis, encouragement of charity, and one of the forms is to feed the poor. And then Allah uses that also part of the kafara, the penalty, and the compensation for violation of the laws. And also the issue of condemnation in 4 ayat, as far as those who will go to Jahannam. One of the reasons for that would be that they did not really care about taking care of the poor people. And this is what I would like to actually, emphasize on this point here, that there is a hadith where we are told that the poor are the dependents of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the rich are the trustees of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so Allah says, I have given my wealth to you. You are the omana. You are my wakil. I have allowed you to use it for yourself, but not 100%. You had to also take care of my dependents, because the real owner of everything is me. And that is something that we have to always keep in our mind. There is a interesting dua, I think it's a month of Rajab or Sha'ban, I don't remember exactly, from Imam Zainul Abidin alayhi salatu wasalam. I think it's the Salawat Sha'baniya, or the one before that in Rajab, where one statement says that, oh Allah, bless me from your fadl and your grace, so that I may help those whom you have deprived. If you really think about it, what are you trying to say to God? If Allah has deprived somebody, you want to go and help him? Yes. Because when Allah deprives somebody, there is imtihan for them. When Allah blesses someone, that's an imtihan for that person. And so here the whole issue is that, oh Allah, grant me vastness in my wealth, so that I can help those whose rizq you have, restrained. And this is where we have to realize that when the wealth is given by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it comes with that conditional, provision that we have to share with those who are less fortunate. One of the ways by which we do that, since it's related to the month of Ramadan, I would like to briefly, connect that with the issue of fuqara and masakeen, the issue of zakatul fitra. Based on, ihtiyat wajib, of course, zakatul fitra should be given to the Shia Isna Ashari, number one. Number two, zakat al-fitra should not be sent out if they are deserving people in your own city. You cannot ignore the people who are around. Number three, if there is no deserving Shia Isnashar in the city, then it can be. It may be given to other Muslims, provided those other Muslims are not from the Nasibi. Nasibi means those who have the hatred and bughz towards the Ahlul Bayt. Not every Sunni is a Nasibi, remember. Many of them don't believe in them as the A'immah, but they still have respect and love for them. Whereas Nasibi is somebody who has hatred towards the Ahlul Bayt. You can't give fitra or charity to them. An important point here, one more masala before I come to that point. Zakat al-fitra should not be given to a drunkard, somebody who is known to be a drunkard, or one who is known to be tariq salat. Means he doesn't, pray at all. Or someone who openly commits sin. If you know there is somebody from the relatives or the neighbors who are deserving, then they have bigger priority than others. Now, when it comes to this issue of giving the fitrah, remember, fitrah is part of zakat. It's known as zakatul fitr or zakatul fitrah. And the general ruling has been that you can use it for the 8 or 9 causes which are there for zakat, which includes fi sabilillah, so issue of masjid, school, any community activity will come in. But remember, innama as-sadaqat lil-fuqara wal-masakin. The first 2 categories in that list is fuqara and the masakin, and therefore you will see that the maraji these days are leaning, from what I have seen, starting with late Ayatollah Khoi, Ayatollah Sistani, even Ayatollah Makarim, Ayatollah Gulpaygani, and many others, who actually say it's ihtiyati wajib to restrict the usage of fitrah only for the poor and the needy and not for other religious causes. There was a time when fitrah was gathered by the centers for maintaining their own centers. But the emphasis is you have to first take care of the people. Yes, buildings are very important, and I am not against it. But for the buildings, you look for other causes, other funds, whether it is homes or other donations, we can do that. Or even when you pay homes, what are you paying? The profit or the surplus that you have, you're giving away 20%. You want to give to the center, give another 20% from your 80. These days we only go for that homes, and we want to do everything in that homes only. To the extent sometimes I get questions, Maulana, can I deduct my Jamaat membership dues from the homes that I'm paying? Come on. That's your own use. It's your own benefit. You can't do that. And so we realize, okay, you pay 20% from your savings. It means you still have 80% which is yours. That is actual donation. That was the due and tax that you have to pay. And so when we talk about maintaining our centers, these are very good causes, very important causes. I don't deny that. But we have to realize when it comes to the issue like sadaqat as well as fitrah, the emphasis is that you should look at the need of the human beings before the needs of the buildings. And that is the emphasis that we have in our Sharia also. And that's why we have to really look at this issue more carefully, inshallah. I think we have a few minutes. 5 minutes. Any questions? Nothing from the ladies? We didn't go to the masail of namaz this evening. Inshallah, we'll continue with that tomorrow, inshallah. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين.